It's the Eagle Community Television Forum with your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi, and welcome to the Forum here on Eagle Television. Great to have you watching along as we have a special guest, somebody that's in and out of our part of the world a lot, but spends a lot of time in Washington, and that's our U.S. Representative, Dr. Roger Marshall. Dr. Marshall, good to have you here today.
Gary's glad to be back here in Hays, Kansas. Just had a good visit at the university and going to spend the rest of the day here.
Well, you know what? You get to travel a lot. You get to spend most of your time in Washington, but then you're back here, I know, a lot on weekends. Talk a little bit about your world, because at one point you were delivering babies all times of the day. Now you're delivering a different kind of product. How's that feel?
It's very physically demanding. Typically, I'm spending a day a week traveling to D.C. and then a day coming back to Kansas as well. So it's a pretty long week. And then when I get home, there's always something to do as well. So typically, I'm at a town hall on a Saturday morning, say in Atwood, Kansas, or Manhattan, Kansas, or Hays, America. Spend the night somewhere, stop at home on Sunday for church, and then head to Wichita for the airport again to catch a flight back on Sunday night. So it's physically challenging, no doubt.
Well, you know, I see the schedule that you keep, and I'll talk to people that work out of Washington a lot. The traveling takes a chunk of time out just alone. Also gives you a chance to kind of catch up on those things. So when you get to Washington, it starts pretty quick. Several things going on that we have a chance to talk about with what you're doing there. First off, one of the biggest things that covers our area is the farm bill that's out there and going. Now, I know there's a lot of other issues in Washington. We won't mess with all those. We'll let the CNN and Fox News take care of that. But the farm bill is important to Kansans.
Absolutely. And Gary, I think that I appreciate you spending time on it. There seems to be a lot of other more interesting things going on as well.
Tabloid stuff.
But what's important to Kansas is a farm bill. 60% of the economy in my district is driven by agriculture. We're the largest ag-producing district in the entire country. So, of course, a farm bill is important to us. And certainly one of my pledges when we ran for Congress was to get on that ag committee and help write a strong farm bill. So I think the heavy lifting's been done. We've had 110 hearings in Washington on this. We did a 10-stop listening session across the state. I participated in 3 of the 6 national farm bill listening sessions as well. So we've listened and we've listened, and now we put pen to paper, and I think in 2 weeks we'll be rolling that out for America to see.
What did you learn? Because Kansans, they see the news, they hear the news. They're going, what are they telling you when you're out on the tour?
Yeah, well, I think from an agriculture standpoint, what's most important to agriculture is to have crop insurance. And the next most important issue would be the Title I funding for PLC and ARC. So farm incomes are 52% of what they were 4 years ago. This will be the 4th year in a row of depressed, once in a generation low in prices as well. So they need a strong farm bill. I don't have to tell you about the 7 plagues of Egypt that have hit Kansas in the past year, and that's not unusual for us, and that's why crop insurance is so important. I mean, last year we had a snowstorm in May and a hailstorm in March, and we lost cattle, we lost wheat, and then we had a huge fire as well. So we need a crop insurance that helps stabilize the market. You know that our country spends only about 6% of our income on groceries. Most of the rest of the developed world is spending 18 or 20%. And that crop insurance, that Title I funding, helps keep the price of groceries down for all Americans.
One of the things I know getting into the process is when you look into that farm bill, it's more than just farm. Were you surprised by that?
Well, I studied a lot before I got there, but I think when I decided to run for Congress, certainly I took a close look at the Farm Bill, and you're right, about 80% of it goes for its nutrition supplement, and that's actually the most controversial part of the bill. We thought we were real close to having complete agreement, a wonderful bipartisan bill, and unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago, the Democrats walked away from the table over the nutrition bill. I mean, they literally just stopped negotiating. And if I could just describe the controversy for a second, what we were asking for is some type of a work or training requirement in the bill. That if you're a person between the ages of 18 and 65 and you don't have a 12-year-old or less under at home to take care of, if you're not disabled, that if you're on food stamps, you would spend 20 hours a week either working or training to work, and we're going to fund that training. My belief has always been we should not only give people a hand out, but give them a hand up. Teach people to fish as well as give them fish. And because of this request, the Democrats have walked away from the negotiating table.
And that puts you back a couple more weeks and stalls things a little bit more. for getting the things that people in rural parts of the world really need to get that happen. But you think you'll be out here sometime? This program is going to run kind of the middle part of April, just into tax season, so we all get a chance to pay our share to make this happen. But the Farm Bill, when will actually happen?
Yeah. So first of all, speaking of the tax day, it's going to be great that the average Kansas family is going to be getting to keep $2,000 more of their hard-earned money thanks to that Tax Cuts and Jobs bill. I can't help but throw in that plug.
But you know what? Those of us that watch the craziness going on, kind of the circus in D.C., there's been some really good things happen, and that tax bill is one of them.
Absolutely. So to answer your first question, I expect that in April, we'll be voting on this in the House of Representatives on the Farm Bill, or else in the 1st of May. I expect Senator Roberts, who's running the ag side over there in the Senate, to be a couple weeks behind us. So I think America's going to see it, and we'll be voting on it in April or May. The Tax Cuts and Jobs bills, we're seeing great things across the country. I just talked to one of my best friends, a good accountant up in Phillipsburg, Kansas. He's been doing accounting up there for 30 years or so, a good Fort Hays graduate, and he said 96% of his clients are seeing a break on taxes because of the tax cuts bill. We were predicting 90. He's seeing 96% of Americans see an improvement. That's great.
That keeps the money here in Kansas, too.
Keeps the money here in Kansas.
Somewhere else.
And I was just in Hutchinson yesterday, a packaging company, they make boxes. Because of this tax cuts bill, they gave every employee a $500 bonus, and they're going to invest $15 million more in capital equipment to improve what they've got and expand their businesses as well. So all over the state, all over the country, we've created millions of jobs because of this tax cuts, and millions of Americans have received either a raise or a bonus.
You know what, the several sides to the issue, and we just went through, and it's a big word, omnibus.
Oh boy.
It sounds to me like they just throw everything on the bus and you get to vote yes or no. Is that correct? What happened in that big omnibus bill?
Boy, it was one of the toughest pills I've ever had to swallow. You know, Gary, when people ask me, when you go to bed at night, knowing what you know, what do you worry about? And, you know, I try not to worry about anything, but I am sure concerned, my biggest concern is the national debt. The national debt is a bigger threat to our military, to our schools, to our roads and bridges than any foreign country is over the long term. So my big concern was, looking at this omnibus, is adding to that national debt. But when I ran for Congress, I ran with the priority of making our country stronger again, funding the military, and taking care of our veterans. And we did that in the omnibus. So we funded the military to the tune of $700 billion, up $200 billion from President Obama's legislation. We were at a state now where only about 2/3 of our airplanes could fly, only 1/3 of our fighter jets from the Navy could fly. So our military is in horrible repair, so we're kind of making up for some years gone by. We're going to spend $185 billion for our veterans, huge priority to us. And then we're going to spend about $50 billion on international security, making our borders more secure. But unfortunately, to do that, to get enough votes on the Democrat side in the Senate, where it takes 60 votes, we had to take on some more social programs as well and inflated the price tag. So the only way I could get the military funded was to take that price tag along with it. But I'm not done yet. We will keep working on the size of this budget.
I think for those of us sitting out here in I'll say, rural parts of the world, even though there's money involved, at least it seemed like there's some people working together for a change. Instead of all yes and all no, at least something went through, even though there's more dollars involved.
Right.
Did you feel that on the floor when you were out on the floor?
Absolutely. This, people say they want a bipartisan bill. This is what a bipartisan bill looks like.
Yeah.
There was a majority of Republicans that voted for it. Not a majority of Democrats, but a significant chunk of the Democrats voted for it as well. And one of my goals was, if we were going to have to spend the money, that I wanted to make sure it was going towards rural America. And I just want to share that there's a significant amount of funding for rural America, a significant amount of funding for a lot of water projects across the district. I think you're seeing the water systems, the disposal systems are aging out and they need to be replaced. There's money in here that we're funding to help infrastructure, a huge amount of money for rural broadband, like an increase of about 400% for rural broadband. For roads and bridges, for your airport out here in Hays Hays, Kansas. There's monies in there to help keep that funding. The ESA funding is one of the things that you all benefit here in Hays from. So there is a lot of money towards rural America, and I think that's this president saying rural America is important. That rural America is what elected President Trump president, and he's acknowledging that.
Well, it's good to see that, because that is a significant part of infrastructure, especially where you're looking at where we are. We need roads to get where we need to go. We need airports to get where we need to go. We need good broadband to be able to connect with the rest of the world. So it's good to see those parts of it. On say the other hand, President Trump talked a lot about tariffs.
Oh boy.
And what's going on. And while tariffs may be good for steel and things like that, does it affect our farmers, and how do you help farmers still be able to trade overseas when we're talking tariffs on things maybe coming in?
Well, as you probably know, the tariffs have already impacted farming. About a month ago, I guess it would have been, the president introduced a tariff on washing machines and solar panels. And almost overnight, China retaliated against sorghum. And I know in Pawnee County Co-op in Larned, Kansas, overnight the price of sorghum went from $5.50 a bushel to $4.50 a bushel. So they're sitting on 400,000 bushels of sorghum, Milo as I would grown up called it.
Now $1 less a bushel.
So they lost $400,000 overnight. Agriculture is always the tip of the spear when it comes to retaliation, when it comes to these tariffs, to these trade wars. And that's why we need a strong agreements done. And, as far as what can I do, I was at the White House 2 or 3 weeks ago, sit down with the president and had this same discussion with the United States trade representative in the room, just to make sure that they understand that agriculture is always the tip of the spear. And sure enough, this is what's happening.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel there? I know there's been some negotiations kind of underneath the headlines.
Yeah.
Headlines you kind of find aren't always correct, but there's been are we making progress to maybe get some of that back?
Absolutely. So NAFTA was going nowhere for months, and especially Canada was not willing to negotiate. When President Trump announced the steel tariff, suddenly Canada is engaged. 16% of our steel comes from Canada, about 9% from Mexico, only 2% of our steel comes from China. So that's forced them to negotiate, and now he's given them a pass. If they negotiate in good faith, they'll get a pass on the steel tariff. South Korea, a significant importer of steel from them to here as well. You notice that we're making great progress on that trade agreement as well, improving it. So I think some of it's saber rattling by President Trump, but certainly he's very concerned about China, and I think rightfully so, that China has taken significant advantage of the United States for the past several decades, and there may be some pain when it comes to dealing with China.
Is Europe involved in that discussion at all? Because that's one of the things there's other countries other than China, South Korea, et cetera. How does Europe fit into that trade?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You ask about Europe. So about a week after the steel tariff, Great Britain sent their head trade ambassadors to my office, and they just want to know where we were and how President Trump was doing, and wanted to make sure that I knew that Great Britain was indeed separating off from the European Union. So the European Union is trying to fight back, and it's really interesting. So they had a targeted response. They came after Harley Davidson. They're going to put a tariff on Harley Davidson motorcycles because Paul Ryan's district makes those motorcycles. And then they're coming after Nancy Pelosi's district, jeans. I forget which jeans it is that are made in her district. So sure, they're making waves. We'll figure it out. There may be some short-term pain, but this day...
Long-term, it may be a better deal.
It will be a better deal.
If it doesn't hurt our farmers.
If I could communicate one thing with our farmers back here, is President Trump has the same goals that we have. He wants more American jobs. He wants a stronger trade agreements. He wants to take care of American farmers. We have the same goals. Sometimes we don't want to go out at the same direction. And he's thrown us a couple curveballs on these tariffs. He's been willing to walk away from NAFTA. We've been encouraging him to stay engaged. 38% of the exports from Kansas go to Mexico or Canada. Overall, they're a pretty good customer, and let's work to keep them.
Yeah, that NAFTA ties into the whole trade and tariff thing that goes on with that. So another issue right out there. We have a whole list of things we could talk about, but we're going to run out of time. I'm going to take a break here. Let's come back and talk about immigrations, DACA, some of those things that may not be critical to our part of the state, but maybe in others.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that. And also, as always, there gets to be an election.
Oh
yeah, we'll talk about that and some things you're hearing and things you're planning to do. Our guest is Dr. Roger Marshall, our U.S. representative in Washington, D.C., Back with more after this.
Hayes Med is your first and best choice for healthcare. They're the only facility providing tertiary level services in this region. With more than 70 physicians and 26 specialties ranging from heart, orthopedic, spine care, cancer, obstetrics and gynecology, wound care, rehabilitation and surgery, including the Da Vinci robotic surgery, Hayes Med is your comprehensive health provider for people throughout Western Kansas. Hayes Med, helping people be healthy.
Eagle Communications is your ultimate business partner. We provide business class phone with customizable features and fast, reliable internet. Your knowledgeable team at Technology Solutions has a broad base of IT services to meet your needs. Let the experts at Marketing Solutions get your message to the right people on the best platforms. The only piece missing is your business. Call Eagle Communications today at 877-61-EAGLE.
And welcome back. It's the second half of our forum program with our special guest today, Dr. Roger Marshall, U.S. Representative representing our part of the state in Washington, D.C. If you have any questions, comments, kind of some follow-up from this, I'd like to hear from you. You send me a note at gary.shorman@eaglecom.net. Don't put an E in Shorman. That'll mess things up. You can also go on to the forum or on Facebook, and you'll find us under ECTV Forum. Always like to hear from you. Again, our guest, Dr. Roger Marshall, a great Bend doctor who is now in his second year as a representative, U.S. representative in Washington, D.C., travels that trip to D.C. every week. Dr. Marshall, we finished the first half of the program talking about a few other issues out there. Immigration is one. I just, hear just in the news, a new part of the wall's going up. How does that affect Kansans? Do you get much input on that, or is it kind of a so-so issue for Kansas?
It's actually a huge issue. It's absolutely a top 2 or 3 issue in the western half of the state, or certainly the western third of the state.
Is that more southwest part of the state than it is in our area?
Absolutely. I think when you get from Dodge to Garden to Liberal, but the bigger issue over the state of Kansas, the 2 biggest challenges for the state of Kansas over the next decade or 2, one of them is certainly skilled labor force. And when I talk about a skilled labor, I'm talking about one of the skills is the ability to work long, hard hours. I think that's a skill that many Americans have forgot about. So we have 50,000 open jobs across this state right now, 6 million jobs open across the country that can't be filled. So this immigration issue is part of the solution to that. So it is a huge issue back in the southwest part of the state. But it creeps up to to Colby and to Goodland and Atwood as well.
Part of the thing in the omnibus is that there was a kind of a carve out, and that probably went down to the wire, on the DACA issue of those that have been immigrated in, maybe some kids. How did that play out in your office?
Right. So I'm a pretty objective person. There's about 3,000 DACA recipients in the state of Kansas, and we need to do the right thing by them, and we need to fix that problem. But proportionally, the biggest issue in Kansas with immigration is an agricultural work visa. That's what we need. An agricultural work visa can impact tens of thousands of Kansan jobs. The work visas the way they are now are temporary for agriculture, and guess what? Our cattle need to be milked 365 days a year. The cattle have to be fed 365 days a year. So what I'm trying to do is bring a coalition of people who want to solve DACA, that also another group of people that want to solve the agricultural work visa issue. So working together, it never was going to be part of the omnibus. I knew it wouldn't be, but give this president credit. He's holding us accountable. He says that we're supposed to legislate. He's supposed to enforce the law. He is pushing us to fix this problem.
One of the things that also keeps popping up when you talk about things coming out of Washington, D.C., and you work on the tax end of things, you work on immigration, you work on all those other things. You mentioned earlier the infrastructure program. What will that mean for highways, roads, bridges, those that are aging out?
Yeah. So in this particular bill, there's about $20 billion for rural infrastructure. And we're certainly trying to dedicate some of it for rural broadband, some of it to airports, some for railroads, but a significant chunk would go to roads and bridges as well. But this won't touch the bigger problem that Kansas has with infrastructure when it comes to roads and bridges. I think that can only be solved through a bigger infrastructure bill. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of dollars left in the Kansas Highway Fund, because what President Trump wants to do is have this $250 billion of federal money leveraged. with local municipalities, local states to build more roads and bridges. That being said, he wants to carve out an additional $50 billion for rural America. Again, a big tip of his hat to rural America. So this is just the start, a down payment on the infrastructure for roads and bridges, but isn't going to solve the bigger problem.
You've had a chance to travel some fun places, and in one of those, I say fun may not be the right word, maybe interesting, Cuba.
Yeah.
What's the story with Dr. Roger Marshall going to Cuba?
Sure. First of all, the Cuban government invited me to go there, and it's a
interesting place.
Oh, it's fantastic. It kind of reminds me of what Key West was like 25 years ago when I went there for the first time. But to me, it's an opportunity to expand markets. When people ask, what can my congressman do to help rural Kansas, it's to improve the price of wheat and open that market up. Cuba has a huge tourist industry that's growing. And what do tourists do? They eat. They eat 5 or 6 times a day. So right now, Cuba's buying all of their wheat from France. Our wheat has a higher protein content and is better for baking, so they'd like to buy it. But right now, they can't borrow money from anybody in the United States to do that, versus France is loaning them money to buy the wheat. So I was trying to figure out what was going on that we could maybe open that market up, figure out some better financing going along. And I actually took a second trip there. There was some type of talk about an acoustic injury to some of our people that were down there, and I wanted to find out if there was any truth to that or not.
Well, you have just an interesting job because it covers, whether it be being a part of Cuba, you have to make choices on that. I asked you this before, I'll let you answer this for the group, but do you ever miss just delivering babies, getting that call in the middle of the night, say there's a baby, I need to go deliver the baby, and do you miss that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was my favorite part of the job, probably, that part where I got to deliver the baby and hear that first cry. And even though it was usually like just a second or 2 or 5, it seemed like minutes. Every baby, delivered over 5,000 babies, but every baby you deliver, I would sit there and typically I would pray for the baby as I was just delivering it. It kind of helped me stay focused and wait for that first cry. And then take the baby and then hand it to a mom and the husband sitting beside him. And to see that bond, that you just have to be in the room, and I'm sure whoever of us have had children, that special bond, that just total non-judgmental, complete agape love for this baby. I miss that.
It's different than delivering a bill that you have to sign that has all those things that you're talking about, but I can see why the passion involving that, what that brings to Kansas. Now, your family, what do they tell you? I know you get to hear from everybody else.
Yeah.
What do they say? Hey, they probably call you Roger.
Yeah.
Why don't you go get this done for us? What did your family tell you?
Yeah.
Your dad?
They don't tip, they're more of a support. So I would say this is much harder on my family than me. My folks just had their 80th birthdays, and most sons are helping their parents a lot more when they turn 80, that they're around. There's health issues. I haven't went fishing with my dad for a year now, but I'm going to go hopefully in 2 weeks if I'm lucky with him.
But he doesn't ever go say, Roger, you really need to fix this problem.
No, I think it's more generic. I think that every time there's a veterans issue, my dad, as a military guy, he says, Roger, take care of the veterans. When Mike Pompeo was in the news, he said, Mike Pompeo's a good man.
He's taking care of you.
He should be a good guy. Take care of the military. I even went after the omnibus was passed, the budget, I called my mom, and I really thought she'd beat me up a little bit on adding to the national debt. And so I kind of apologized that I added to the national debt, and she said to me, Roger, don't worry about it. You and Mr. Trump are businessmen. You're going to figure this out. So I think that my family's my encourager. Keep me home, but much more of an encouragement, and encourage me to doing what I'm doing. And if there's anything controversial or ethical, and I'm trying to sort that out, they're a real good sounding piece to say, what do you think? So they don't come to me unless I go to them typically, unless it's military or veterans, and my dad makes sure that I toe the line on that.
Well, that means that, you've been here, you get a chance to run again, assuming you want to run again, and do that. What's kind of the game plan for that? I mean, because now all of a sudden it's a little different. You have the listening tours, go back doing, now do you get a chance to work again?
Yeah. So we do plan on running again. And to me, this race is about promises kept. I think that what people are going to want to know is I said what and I did what. I said that I would make this country more secure than it was. ISIS is 1% of the size it was a year and a half ago. Our borders are 70–80% more secure, and they're getting more secure every day. We funded the military. I promised I would take care of the veterans, and we've done that. I promised I would get on the Ag Committee and write a strong farm bill. So, we're kind of checking these boxes off. I said I would help make the economy stronger. That no matter whether you think roads and bridges or schools or the military is the most important, that we need a strong economy. And the economy is exponentially better, 4 quarters in a row, a 3% GDP growth, unemployment a 15-year low, millions of people receiving increased wages and bonuses. So by rolling back regulations and our tax cuts and jobs bill, we've improved the economy. So I think this is about promises made, promises kept. And based on the feedback I'm getting, that most people are pretty happy with the job that we're doing. Not everybody likes every vote I've made, but I think if they've taken the time to understand why I've made them and give me a chance to explain them, some of them are tough votes. It's not always black and white. Now I need to get focused on driving the total expense of the government down and start driving down that national deficit. The only way we're going to touch that is to start driving the cost of health care down. Was unable to get that fixed before, so we failed at that. Now the House, we did it, the Senate didn't, but I take total responsibility. 1/4 of the federal dollars are being spent on health care between Medicare and Medicaid. $200 billion wasted last year by the federal government on Medicaid and Medicare. Fraud and abuse, $200 billion of the trillion. So I am locked in on fixing health care. So I think the election takes care of itself if I'm doing my job. I think that Kansans will give me another chance to keep at it. I think we've got the country moving in the right direction. Who doesn't think that the country's not better today than it was a year ago?
You've taken some positive steps, and you mentioned those things on school safety.
Yeah.
That's a tricky issue on school safety, and trying to articulate that back to the voters on school safety means how do we manage the other end of this, which is guns? And I know that's very important to Kansas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a pro-Second Amendment congressman from a pro-Second Amendment state, district and state. I don't think you're going to find a district that would, if there was a poll that would say the Second Amendment is very important to us. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I don't wear it on my shirt sleeve. I try to wear it on my heart. So what I've tried to do is fix the real problem, and I think Congress has done that. Again, it's not making the national headline, but a lot of funding in this bill we passed was to help make our schools more safe and more secure. So there's funding in there for you to improve the locks on your doors, video cameras, panic buttons. There's funding in there for students and teachers and police officers to get training to help understand who is this potential shooter. What does that person look like? What's their mental status look like? Our goal is that the kids would have a smart app on their phone that they could give an anonymous tip to the special people. And maybe that's an anonymous tip about a friend that's suicidal, someone's dealing drugs, someone that they think is mentally unstable as well. So there's a lot of funding to address mental health issues and to help make our schools more secure. So I think that's the treatment. And just encourage local schools to take a look at themselves. When people come to Washington and wanting Washington to solve all their problems, usually doesn't go real well. We make it worse. So I would encourage every school to look how they can make their own school more secure. And I'm telling you, I've been in several schools lately, this week already, and they have opportunities they could do to make their own school more secure.
I want to invite everybody, if you get a chance, and Dr. Marshall is in your area, because you'll be covering the state, I know, to ask those questions, ask those things, and be able to follow up and say, hey, we'd like this to happen, and I appreciate your ability to say, hey, I want to do the right things for Kansans. So.
And they can go to our website, just Google Roger Marshall, and you'll get our Facebook and all of our internet. And there's ways to email us questions. Every day my office answers hundreds of emails and, 10 or 100 phone calls every day as well. So if you Google Roger Marshall, Congressman Roger Marshall, you'll get to our website, and really encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. I try to give people the facts and let them decide on them. I try to give them pertinent news articles that I'm reading that would cover a particular issue. Try not to be partisan. Try to say, here's some facts that I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm reading today that's helping me make up my mind on these issues later.
Well, it's going to be a good election coming up, and one of those things, we'll be seeing you out on the campaign trail. I know that, and congratulations for the hard work you've done and the success you've had in Washington, D.C.
Glad to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Our guest, Dr. Roger Marshall, who's our U.S. representative, represents us in Western Kansas and all of us in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching the program. The program is brought to you by Hayes Med and by Eagle Communications, our community connected.
Are you frustrated with Wi-Fi dead zones in your home? It happens when you don't have Boost, the cutting-edge Wi-Fi solution from Eagle Communications. A Boost-certified Eagle technician maps your home, then installs a dual-band modem and router, plus discrete access points to deliver wall-to-wall Wi-Fi with no dead zones. Boost powers all your family's devices in all the places you love to live. Get Boost. Wi-Fi made simple. Only from Eagle Communications. Call today.